Production is happening all day, every day, all around us. What is production? It's just how we turn inputs into outputs. How do we think about production? Well, it's most useful to think about a production function as being that specific relationship between inputs and outputs. And if you stop and think about it, the production of just about every good and service in your life is made up of both fixed inputs and variable inputs. The fixed inputs are generally things like buildings and machinery, and the variable inputs are things like labor and the cost of raw goods, for instance. Now, of course, if we're talking about the long run, everything can be varied, but the long run is just some time period out in the future where that's true. Most of production happens in the short run, when at least one thing, think your building lease, your machinery cost, etc., when that's fixed. The total product curve shows us then that exact combination of inputs to outputs for a particular firm. It's always a good idea to think about a specific example, so pizza would be a good example. Look at all that deliciousness, and you've got variable and fixed inputs. Think about which ones are in which categories. Most of your machines and buildings will probably be fixed costs, and most of your ingredients and your labor and your electricity and your cleaning costs, those will be variable. You can increase them when business is booming, decrease them when you don't need them as much. So to get even more specific, we want to start categorizing our inputs. So what are the things that go into the production? Well, they can be lumped into these categories. Natural resources, labor, that's your human work effort. Capital, those are your human-made aids to production like buildings and machines. Technology, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is risk-taking and combining resources in new ways. And that's a little bit different than just plain old labor. So the production function puts it all together and imagines what that looks like. What does our output look like? It's some sort of function of your natural resources, your labor, your capital, your technology, your entrepreneurship. We're not specifying exactly how they're related, but we know that some alchemy happens and magically the production is made. So the output is a direct function of these inputs. And the more inputs you have, probably the more outputs you're going to have. And to get even more specific, we are considering again that fixed inputs are generally your machines and variable inputs are generally things like labor. So let's just narrow it down to those two things, capital and labor. So the shorthand form of the production function is basically that your output quantity is some sort of function of those two important resources. Of course, there are more, but we just want to focus on these for the time being. So let's consider another type of production in the short run. The output here is logs or lumber, which is also called total product. And that's to help distinguish it from quantity of input. So quantity of output, same as total product, different than quantity of input. It is a function of a couple of things, amount of labor and amount of capital. But since we're talking about the short run, capital is fixed in the short run usually. So really, in the short run, how much you produce is mainly down to the amount of workers that you have. And here's a useful term, marginal product. Marginal product is the additional output that one more worker or one more unit of labor, could be an hour of labor, one more unit produces. So the total output or the total product, the increase in the total product from a change in the amount of labor. So that triangle there means delta, which is shorthand for change. So the change in total output divided by the change in the number of workers. And for most types of production in the short run, the pattern is marginal product rises for a minute and then it declines. There's a point beyond which adding one more worker will actually slow down everybody. And that, my friends, is some stuff you need to know about production. Enjoy the day.